Hi, everybody, and welcome to Kremlin File. Olga, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah. We have our hair up, everybody. We're in work mode, right now. But we wanted to get this to you. This is our special episode on Ukraine. Everything that you wanted to know about it, but was afraid to ask. How did we get to this crisis? And so that everyone knows what the story is, and that the story, we get it straight.
Okay, yeah, because right now there is so much of a propaganda war, and, Russia they are the masters of diversion. I mean, they really are. Just like with Trump, how, something comes out and he knows how to grab media attention and just shift the attention away from the actual thing. Same thing with Russia. Let me walk everyone back. 1 year ago today, Russia started moving military on Ukraine's borders. They were building up military. They moved in mass military equipment. It continued through April, I believe, and Putin managed to extort a summit from Biden.
That's
right.
So
the headlines broke that, Russia had pulled back troops and everything's okay and wonderful. And that's it. Yes, they pulled back a percentage of troops, but the hardest part is moving in the military equipment. The military equipment remained.
That's right.
A percentage of troops shifted out. Putin meets with Biden in June. And then by the end of June into July, the new phase, and I call this phases. So phase one was 1 year ago. It began with the initial buildup. Phase two is in the summer. Suddenly, there is a huge propaganda build inside of Russia. Putin writes an essay in Ukrainian and basically says Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Every single Russian politician decides to chime in, Russian media to chime in that Ukraine is not a sovereign country. One politician even, said the way to deal with Ukraine going forward is to hang their politicians on the lamppost, off the lamppost. And that's it. And basically, you had this whole propaganda phase lasting for a few months,
right? Questioning
the sovereignty of Ukraine, unprovoked. Ukraine is minding their business, unprovoked. Exactly. And that's what I call phase two. Phase three begins in late August when Lukashenko starts weaponizing migrants and pushing them onto Poland's border, Lithuania's border. We see this crisis go through the end of August, and then it calmed down for a few weeks and then comes back into September, October. At the same time, Russia begins weaponizing energy, sending prices astronomically through the roof. At a point, twice, reversing the distribution of gas from in the Yamal pipeline from Germany back heading towards Poland. So he was moving the gas the other way. So this was, for me, phase three, because here he is threatening Europe. He's showing what can happen between a migrant crisis and at the same time an energy crisis.
That's right.
And then we see come November, Putin, invent this sudden new fear of NATO expansionism. Absolutely nothing changed. Ukraine is not any closer getting into NATO. They still haven't been offered a roadmap. No one expanded. Nothing has happened. Nothing changed. It is just that Putin decided he needs a pretext of now why, he, at the same time that suddenly he started with NATO, again, mass amounts of military started moving in. All the preparations for a full-scale invasion, as according to our intelligence agencies, were being made. And Putin needs a pretext, so he invents NATO.
That's right.
Ends up getting a bunch of summits, and that's it. So this is basically how we got here. The real story is that Putin really, he's 70 years old. His biggest catastrophe he sees in his eyes was the collapse of the Soviet Union. I mean, they still can't get over it. Not Putin, not his hardliners. We saw this on the 30th anniversary. Every former Soviet country has moved on. They moved on. Yep. They're moving towards, a democratic
They're
way.
Going towards, exactly.
For
like
decades already. Yeah, and Russia is still stuck moving backwards, looking backwards. I mean, it was the 30th anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they decide to send hockey players out in an SSSR uniform.
USSR, exactly. Okay, like the old uniforms that they used to use. I remember them when I was growing up, when Canada used to play the Soviet Union in hockey. And I looked at it and I said, what the fuck? Okay, what are you doing? All right.
Yeah.
Going all the way back. Another point, just to add to what you were saying about NATO, okay, which is a complete fabrication, because let's remember that Estonia entered NATO in 2004. Where was all of the hoopla, okay, about Estonia joining NATO? Where was all the hoopla about Romania joining or any other country? Let's also remember that on that border, okay, on the Russian border, all right, Russia borders 14 different countries, and only 6 of them, and it's a very, very small piece, only 6 of them are part of NATO, okay? Ukraine is not.
And let's remember, Russia is the one who has invaded their neighbors. End of story. NATO has never invaded Russia.
It's a defensive treaty, okay, of countries that come together to defend themselves. This is not something that is aggressive. As Olga was saying, this is simply a narrative of encirclement that does not exist at all, okay?
And Russia has shown themselves to be the aggressor. They enter their neighbors, they invaded their neighbors, and that's it. At the end of the day, we have never seen NATO step even 1 inch into Russian territory. That's it. And they never will step 1 inch into Russian territory because NATO has absolutely zero ambitions of taking over Russian territory or in Putin's case, Soviet.
The aggressor here since 2007, okay, 2008, 2007 in Estonia with the cyber attack against Estonia, 2008, Georgia. Okay, and let's remember that they have occupied territory in Georgia. Okay, after 2008, we move into, Ukraine. All right, first Crimea and then Ukraine.
Russia occupies 7% of Ukraine for 8 years now. So, I mean, Ukraine's not looking towards Russian territory. Georgia's not looking towards Russian territory. And I mean, just to show that it's not even about immediate borders, Russia the other day threatened us. I mean, this was kind of laughable, that they are demanding for an immediate withdrawal from Syria. Really? Now Syria is Russian territory?
Yeah.
I mean, so it just shows you that, I mean, and we've seen it in Armenia, and they basically want, this is Putin's goal. Like I started saying, that he is getting older. What the West fails to calculate in all their calculations is the Russian mentality and his mentality of leaving behind a legacy. He wants to be seen as Vladimir the Great, where he started, regaining the Soviet territorial loss after the collapse. And that's what he wants to go down in history. So yes, he's not thinking rationally. These meetings, I mean, Russia never went into these meetings in good faith. The negotiations were, the demands from Russia were laughable. I mean, let's go back to 1997 now. I mean, we need all the countries who joined NATO, we need the NATO troops out of there from 1997.
That's right.
Look, if someone would have asked me who Putin was in 2001, I would have told them who Putin was. I mean, the fact that, Bush found a soul in him, or saw, looked in his eyes and saw a soul. The man blew up apartment buildings. He killed his own citizens to get into power.
Yes.
I don't know what soul there was there, but I mean, he blew up, killed his own citizens to get into power. Then Putin has conducted endless assassinations of dissidents, of, people who have defected, and, jailed opposition figures. So, I mean, this is who they are. This is who Putin and his cronies are. And these are the people advising him. So when the West sits down to negotiate with someone, they have to take the mentality into a factor in that mentality into the calculus. And whereas Westerners can sit and negotiate amongst each other, in a normal way, and that's what actually differentiates us from Russia, Putin can't, and his regime can't. I mean, you are negotiating with people who are criminals, who have hijacked their own country, robbed their country, have robbed, innocent Russians, continue to jail and kill Russians. This is who you're negotiating with, so that's one of my biggest frustrations. And when, you see a lot of people in Europe and US start making calculations of, how these negotiations are going to go and whatnot, they always forget the one thing, and that is factoring the Russian mentality from the Kremlin, what their military strategic aims are, and what their just strategic aims are as a whole.
We are not dealing with the normal business as usual. And this is the mistake that is being made, especially by our allies that are here in Europe. And I'm sad to say this because I'm sitting in Italy and it makes me sick, that they are not treating this, or looking at this as something that could destroy our democratic world order, right? The one that the international rules-based order. Exactly.
That is the aim
with
of
China
Russia.
and other authoritarians. Exactly.
That is absolutely the aim of what they have been doing. I mean, this is hence you see all the election interferences and attacks and support for the far right, for the far left, and, causing chaos, division, and disinformation operations. I mean, it's endless. The whole point is to shift the balance of world power and shift it towards autocracy versus a democratic order.
Thank goodness that the states are stepping up, in this. This is absolutely incredible. The UK, just to give a little bit of an idea of what is happening, the United States is also thinking, they've put certain units in readiness. We're talking about aiding Ukraine with logistics and medical, aviation, transportation, intelligence, surveillance support systems. There's a fantastic article in Defense One about this. If you'd like to read up on it, please do. The UK is stepping up. They were one of the first to send out.
Yeah, UK is taking the lead in this. I mean, it's
incredible.
Exemplar.
I know. Look, to tell you the truth, I really don't like Johnson. I think he's a real asshole. But in this situation, they are showing leadership, whereas other countries, and just to finish off with the UK and the US, and this is something, Olga, that you were looking at as well. There's a heavy-duty sanctions bill that is being discussed at this time. And news came out not too long ago, I think it was either yesterday or today, that they're also considering the sanctioning of the oligarchs and Putin himself.
And there's a piece of legislation in place. It's called the Magnitsky Act. It was named after my lawyer who was killed in Russia, Sergei Magnitsky. And it allows the British government to freeze the assets and ban the visas of people who are involved in high-level corruption and human rights abuse. And so the easy way of doing things for us, and in a very asymmetric way as far as Putin is concerned, is to freeze the money of a certain number of oligarchs. And so we have a tool, the Magnitsky Act. We actually know who these oligarchs are who hold Putin's assets. We know that they are held in London, and we know that Putin values his money.
We're talking trillions of dollars that are being moved out of Russia through Western institutions, through enablers in the West, that are helping Putin finance his operations and the terrorist attacks and everything in between, the invasions, everything, So, I mean, this money needs to be cut off. And the only way to cut it off is by going after the people who move it for Putin. I mean, you're not going to find a Vladimir Putin bank account anywhere, but everyone does know who moves the money for Putin. All the intelligence agencies know. So, I mean, this is who you go after, the people who are moving these, the money for him, that they're setting up these companies, for that purpose. So, no, I'm very happy. And look, people at the beginning were saying, not giving enough credit to United States. And I actually told someone recently, I said, listen, you don't understand what's happening. I'm like, we might not, besides the fact we're sending weapons and making the very strong statements, you see Britain more out front. I said, but we are in the back coalition building. And it's no coincidence you see Spain, Canada, and the Baltics, and
the Baltics,
everyone coming together and saying, we will contribute this amount of military, we'll contribute this amount of military equipment, we'll contribute this amount of money. And for people who say, who cares about Ukraine? If we allow Russia, first of all, if Russia fully invades Ukraine, as the intelligence reports indicate, I mean, that will change the world order to begin with, because then what is to stop anyone from saying, I like my neighbor, I'm going to take over their country?
If Russia invades and occupies Ukraine, what's next? Certainly, Russia's efforts to turn its neighbors into puppet states, to control their activities, to crack down on any spark of democratic expression will intensify. Once the principles of sovereignty and self-determination are thrown out, you revert to a world in which the rules we've shaped together over decades erode and then vanish. And that emboldens some governments to do whatever it takes to get whatever they want. Even if that means shutting down another country's internet, cutting off heating oil in the dead of winter, or sending in tanks. All tactics Russia has used against other countries in recent years. That's why governments and citizens everywhere should care about what's happening in Ukraine. It may seem like a distant regional dispute or yet another example of Russian bullying, but at stake again are principles that have made the world safer and more stable for decades.
And second of all, for anyone who thinks this is not going to pour out of Ukraine, Russia has been lashing out at everyone. They have not only lashing out, but they're taking activities, like they're physically doing things, taking steps to lash out at Europe. I mean, between the talks of the Baltics and questioning their sovereignty 20 years later.
That's right. And even Lukashenko piped up and said, Lithuania, we're going to delete you off the map. He did a 3-hour speech the other night, absolutely crazy. He mentioned war 36 times.
It was the beginning of December when one of the most popular Russian shows, I sat there in disgust. Discussing a sovereign country, Lithuania, and saying, should we give it to the Chinese? Well, maybe the Chinese, maybe they'll this. And they're sitting and deciding the fate of a sovereign country. I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is like some kind of insanity. And at the same time, they're also, they cut underground undersea cables off of Norway.
That's right.
We're worried about the cables in Ireland. Cyber attacks are stepping up. So, I mean, it's going to come outside of Ukraine's border, whether we like it or not,
That's right. Thank goodness, Olga, for those Irish fishermen that scared off.
I know.
Applause to those Irish fishermen. Because the Russians were going to be doing some military exercises, and they were right on top of some cables. The Irish fishermen came out and got in their way, so the Russians had to pull out. Disturbing, because those military exercises are so close to Europe.
They are in Europe.
Well, I mean, the mainland. I'm talking about the mainland.
It is. It's right there. I mean, my God, one little mistake and it's hits one of the European countries.
And this is why it's so important. And we're hoping in these days, there is a little bit of a shift that's happening. But Germany and France have to step up. Okay. Germany, they've been moved for years and years and years in their foreign policy by an idea that is called Wandel durch Handel. Okay. And what does that mean? It means that you try to, it's a mentality, okay, of bringing change through trade. And this has not worked. Okay. It has simply not worked because it never stopped Russia from doing anything. What did it do? It made Germany dependent on Russia for certain things. Okay. This is how it ended up. Plus, they captured a lot of the elite business people in Germany. We know of a famous case, Schroeder, who was the ex-chancellor, and now he's working on the advisory board for for Gazprom. And this is what we mean, is that Germany right now is the economically strongest country in Europe that could actually help. Okay. And it's not. They blocked, certain weapons to be transported. They were Estonian weapons that were supposed to be transported. The Estonians wanted them to go over to Ukraine. Germany has a tradition of not allowing weapons to go into war zones, but then they sell weapons, to Middle Eastern countries that are at war. Okay, so they have to clean up their act. It's a new government that's there, and we're hoping they're starting to move a little bit more on sanctions, especially for Nord Stream 2, which Olga and I have talked about in the past. Mm-hmm. So we're keeping an eye on what they're going to do. France, Macron we would like a reset, once again, but that's because he just wants to get into the news. We don't know, we do know that both Germany and France are starting to send... They're starting to beef up their NATO presence in Romania, which is a very interesting, development. That just happened.
Everyone is. Yeah. U.S. too.
Yeah. Everybody's beefing up. Now, for now, Germany has offered a field hospital, which is obviously useful. Nobody wants to say no to something like that. Only 5,000 helmets. I think the Ukrainians, and please correct me, Olga, if I'm wrong, the Ukrainians had asked for 100,000. And, Germany is giving 5,000.
No, they clearly have demonstrated they don't want to help at the moment. Again, if, God forbid, Putin fully invades the country, I mean, they're going to be left with no choice. They either side with Russia.
Exactly. I agree
with you 100%. Stay neutral or stay with
we need
US
to open our borders.
And the West and Europe.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing, too, I mean, I contacted... two people that I know that are my representatives here at the EU level and also at at our national level. And I wrote to them and I asked, are you guys organizing for people who will need help? Either to move from Ukraine or what is going on. So I'm still awaiting word from them because this is an extremely important thing. There may be people who need to flee Ukraine at one point. So the EU, if you're not going to do anything else, get prepared, to help people in some way, or another.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ukrainians don't need a visa to get into Europe, so...
No.
If Putin starts bombing all the main cities, you're going to have a refugee crisis.
Exactly.
Europe Europe won't have much of a choice because people have to leave. So
that's right. Well, the president of the European Parliament, I heard her in an interview last night. Her name is Metsola, and she said that they are starting to organize and get planning done for this. So this was in an interview last night on Italian television. So applause to other nations that have stepped up. Just one little thing. The EU is 27 nations and they are an economic bloc. They do not have a unified foreign policy. And this is come up. And it is so flagrant that they need to sit down and really, work this out.
Well, I mean, it's difficult for them. I mean,
Exactly.
you have Orban, who is on his way to Moscow during this time. You will see people take a more definitive position if Putin fully invades Ukraine. Right now, people, some are saying, let's try diplomacy, let's do this, So right now, you're going to see a lot of, some people are stronger, some countries are stronger, some countries are more like, let's try to talk, maybe we shouldn't sanction. But if Putin
push comes to shove.
Yeah, what it looks like he might do, people aren't, the countries are not going to have a choice. They're going to have to make a very quick decision.
I'm sure that every single person who is within, let's say, Putin's, captured by Putin, okay, either through business, politics, intellectual circles, he's calling in every single favor and chip that he can.
And speaking of calling in favors, and which he has been calling in favors, and goodness, have I seen, all the propaganda. That is one bit I want to cover for the social media. There are several lines that are going around of disinformation, and people really need to be careful with what they share. And I am seeing everything of, we don't want to send our children to die in a war for Ukraine, meaning United States. No one asked U.S. to send any military to Ukraine. No. It is simply just logistics. And yes, United States, as part of their obligation to NATO, does have to protect the eastern flank. That is not related to Ukraine. I mean, it is related because, the war can potentially pour out, but that is their obligation to NATO as a bloc. They must protect the eastern flank. So we are not sending troops to fight Russians in Ukraine. Our troops are going just to stand as a security protection in NATO countries on the eastern flank that are under the threat right now of Russia. That's it. So that is the number one. Number two, I see a lot of disinformation building up, and I see where it's generating from, how it starts off in Russia and trickles through here. Of nuclear weapons and, their nuclear power, and we need to, stop and not push so hard against them.
Please.
They're nuclear power. So, so if they move into Ukraine, what if tomorrow it's the Baltic? So what, we just, because they're a nuclear power, have to let them roll right through Europe and not, say a word? The third one is, it's Europe. Who cares? The whole post-World War II order is based on Europe being peaceful. Because if we wait too late, as we saw with World War II,
that's right,
then, things are much worse. So the whole point is right now, and U.S. is striking, I think personally, and I've said this for the past few months, a perfect balance. Running diplomacy on one line, and then at the same time making preparations in the possibility that Russia does, start war inside of Ukraine at the scale that is being promised.
Yeah.
And so, we need a peaceful Europe. That's for U.S. national security. Exactly. And then the fourth one is that this U.S. is using, this is the newest one, and it's a conspiracy running through Russia, running through Ukraine, running through now on social media, that this is a war between U.S. and Russia. No. Biden, the last thing the Biden administration wanted is any kind of war. The Biden administration wants his Build Back Better plan. That's all he wants right now.
That's right.
He does not want war. He does not, he pulled out of Afghanistan. And here I'm seeing this, it's U.S. is using Ukraine to go to war with Russia. No, we are not. Ukraine doesn't want war. U.S. doesn't want war. Europe doesn't want war. Nobody wants war. The only one who wants war
is Russia.
Is Putin, who has 130,000 soldiers around Ukraine, surrounded with endless, military equipment. So, I mean, there are so many narratives that are being spun, and it's coming from bots, trolls, think tank people, journalists, opinion pieces. Everywhere I look, I see another genius, point coming out.
I wanted to bring everyone's attention to two fantastic articles that Olga wrote about the disinformation war that is going on right now, the propaganda war that we're seeing through different feeds, going up Russia's war elevator. Okay. Russian propaganda is rising in volume. They're so informative. In this article, Olga, you mentioned something that was very important because this propaganda is being generated, controlled, and orchestrated right from the top. We're not talking about this is purposefully done. So be very careful when you're reading something. May I also suggest there are two fantastic documents that were published from the office of the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And he published two fantastic documents exactly saying this is fact and this is fiction. And it's extremely important to understand where it's coming from. And as Olga pointed out in her fantastic article, it comes straight from the top.
And not only does it come straight from the top, the propaganda has shifted. And as everything else that comes in phases, the propaganda shifted. So from November, inside domestically for the Russian audience, it was a daily barrage of NATO is about to launch a nuclear strike on Russia. United States is about to launch a nuclear strike on Russia. NATO is preparing an invasion into Russia. I mean, the insanity and the fear-mongering was insane. I mean, I don't think people, therefore, the majority of people believe it. I mean, they were, busy trying to make a ruble to pay their bills. But the scare tactics were ridiculous. Then and Russia, of course, was playing the victim, and and it's like poor little Putin, and everyone's against him and whatnot. Meanwhile, this is his manufactured crisis. This is the Russian leadership who manufactured this crisis. And then it shifted over to now aggressive. So it's aggressive on 2 points. One, it is aggressive that they are threatening United States directly. They threatened to launch a missile to Nevada, a nuclear missile to Nevada. And that came from a Duma leader. They are threatening to send nuclear weapons to Cuba and to Venezuela. And this is being discussed every single day. And I mean, they are just now threatening. They threaten Sweden, they threaten Finland, and they threaten Norway. I mean, they're lashing out at everyone, the Baltics. And then the third one, which is now very, very worrying because now it's been floating, from last month, where is setting the stage for false flag operations. So it started last month with U.S. mercenaries have moved chemical weapons into Donbass, which is occupied by Russia in eastern Ukraine. Now we are at a point that it is literally every few hours they are warning of an attack that will be launched by United States and Ukraine, or the West and Ukraine, depending which article it is, against Donbass and against Luhansk. So, I mean, and last week, they had, Ukraine and the West are preparing to blow up buildings. I mean, the only one I know so far who blew up buildings is Putin. So this is what's happening. And now this phase is the most dangerous phase because now they are actually setting the stage for a provocation to happen in order for them to respond. So right now is where, So out of all the propaganda that I pay attention to, this is the one because they are, this is not for, seeking concessions. You're not going to get a concession if you're warning that there, are terrorist attacks about to go off orchestrated by U.S. and Ukraine or any kind of attacks inside of eastern Ukraine. You're not going to get concessions from that. So this is the most worrying, and it's coming again from the top.
Yep.
From right underneath Putin to straight down. And it's going through bots, trolls, disinformation outlets, and just
them.
on and on and on. So
exactly. Just 2 words of advice if you're going to be tweeting about Ukraine or if you're going to be reading tweets about Ukraine. Number 1, it is not the Ukraine. Okay. It is simply Ukraine. Just like you would say Spain. You don't say the Spain. Okay. This goes back to something that was another part of their history. All right. Which is no longer. All right. They're an independent country. We call it Ukraine. That's it. It's not a region.
Yep.
It's a country. Independent, democratic country. That's point number 1. Point number 2. Go and check the spelling for city names in Ukraine. For example, Kiev. Olga, how do you spell Kiev?
K-Y-I-V, not K-E or whatever the Russian way is. How do they spell it? K-I-E-V?
With an
K-I-E-V.
I-E-V. Yeah. I made this mistake right in the beginning. All right. And I got piled on, which is fine. It was a rookie mistake there, but you learn.
Yeah, that has been my one of my biggest pet peeves for years. Every time poor Ukraine gets in the news for something, it's like, besides the disinformation, it's the misspelling, it's the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
crazy shit.
On.
We're at a moment where it's extremely delicate and we want to help our Ukrainian friends and show them the support by respecting their language and also, culture, and that they are an independent country. I wanted to sort of move on to something to finish this off. I mean, I have Ukrainian friends. You are Ukrainian, half Russian, your family and everything. So I know that this is probably will make you smile a little bit, maybe make you laugh. But I thought this was something that I found on somebody's feed. And I said, you know what? This is really cool. This was from Sasha Boychenko. And she put together how to talk to your Ukrainian friends, or friends from Ukraine. And this really applies. This came from her own experience of speaking with people who were coming from war-torn countries or were trying to flee. And she learned these things to be able to communicate and show her affection and also no concern for people. So I thought it was something I wanted to share with everybody because I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. And, if you have friends, right, it's important. Number 1. So how to speak with your Ukrainian friends, what to do, in this kind of situation. 1, she writes, check on them. Just say simply by asking, hey, what are you doing? And talk about your own life. All right. It's a nice way to ground the conversation. So you don't need to take pity on them or tiptoeing around issues. Don't be afraid to tell a joke. So this is the first one. So to know your conversations. 2, try to be as present and non-judgmental as possible. So leaving open, that space, right, for conversation. 3, remember that having a balanced, calm, and rational discussion on history or geopolitics means that you are living someplace where you are not psychologically terrorized. So please remember, sensitivity towards this kind of thing. Then, next point, do not treat your Ukrainian friends as a Google search. So what does this mean? Many Ukrainians will be very happy to talk about, if you do have questions, to clarify some doubts, but make sure before talking, maybe just do a little bit of a basic search. Like don't ask them. Don't bombard them also with links from all over the place. I'm sure that they're keeping, on top of things. Then don't be afraid to seem ignorant. About things. I mean, Olga, I ask you stuff all the time. All right. Because if you don't know something, first I do a little bit of a Google search. Then I say, Olga, I found this. Is this okay? All right. And Olga says, no, Mo, it's bullshit. Or yes, Mo, it's fine. So she tells me, she helps me out to understand things. So don't be afraid, to seem ignorant. And don't think that you're going to catch up on 8 years or 100 years of history of Ukraine. It's not going to happen. Okay. So just make sure that you're very polite and respectful. Then the last thing, okay, just be decent. Okay. Be a kind, decent human being. All right. That I think is the basis of all of our relationships with people. Being happy, bring a smile, be decent with someone. Right. Because right now, Olga, and I mean, everybody out there can see this, the United States all over, it's pretty bleak. Okay. Yeah. It's pretty dark right in this moment. So a little bit of kindness, okay, doesn't hurt anybody. And it's a great way to connect. Right, Olga, with people, with everyone that's in our lives. It also helps to cultivate a sense of community, of belonging, all right, that this person matters to you. So these are just sort of,
and the most important that was missed, stop talking for Ukrainians.
Yes, exactly.
Stop them to talking for Ukrainians, because this is unbelievable. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's saying what needs to be done, who should do what. And Ukraine seems to be missing on every single level of these discussions. I mean, exactly. I've read I don't know, countless articles, and it's like, and this needs to happen, and Ukraine needs to do this and this and that, and the only one missing out of this conversation is Ukraine. So stop talking for Ukrainians. Exactly.
That's right.
That's I think the most important. I mean, Ukrainians know what they want the future of their country to be, how far they're willing to go to protect their country. So the most important is let Ukrainians speak, let Ukrainians have a voice, and let them, make their own decisions for their own national security.
Okay, so
thank you guys, and we will keep on updating you as things progress. Hopefully things will move the other way and calm down, but we are here to update and, to answer any questions anyone might have.
That's right. Okay. My DMs are open. Olga's are open. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be shy about that, because it's really important to get the information and get it right. Remember to please follow Olga's feed, because she tweets. All of her stuff is investigated, and there's no bullshit there. Okay. So, as Olga was saying, we'll be keeping you updated on everything that's going on. Okay. So this is from us to you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, and please visit our website, KremlinFile.com. This is a Bunker Crew Media production, hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camarra, with executive producers Marley Clements, Jack Bryan, Grant DeSimone, Ben, Brett, and Jordy Mycelis of Midas Media, with associate producers Ruby Frankel and Sarah Metz. Theme music by Oreste Camargo. Sound editing and mixing by Joy Ellett. Subscribe to Kremlin File wherever you listen to podcasts.